me, here we go. I am an improviser, meaning that I do comedy and have for a really long time, but that also means you can't get me too far off topic. I also have slides that help keep me on topic so I don't get too far off. But that also means feel free to say, hey, Tauri, ask the question when you have the question. I really love answering questions, but this being a two-way conversation makes it more, and we can share. We had, I think, the voice of God may have a question. So if anybody has a question, I want to make sure I have space for you. Nope. Okay. Listen, if God talks once, I guess you're lucky. If he talks twice, you're probably in trouble. I hope my jokes are okay and it's not too early on the West Coast for you. With that, let me get rolling. So a little bit about me. I have been doing diversity education for the last 7 years. And this is just to say, oh, one other thing, this is an atmosphere of learning. So if let's just agree to extend the assumption of positive intent to everyone here on the call. What that does is that just allows us to recognize that we're all here to learn, that we're sharing in good faith, and that the goal is to share and be kind to each other. So if we can just sort of like give me the nod that you're in on that. If you're here in bad faith, I'm sorry, but I hope you have a better day. Yes, grab a cup of tea and feel better. So that's that. I told you I'm a comedian. I've been doing diversity trainings for approximately the last 7 years. I also have 15 years of brand development experience. I am a startup mentor. I work with a lot of startups. I understand what it is to be, to both scale businesses quite large. I've worked for Unilever. I also own a small community theater. So if you have questions about how to do diversity work at any scale, I've consulted on it, but I also do it in my own business. So I understand those challenges firsthand, as well as with those companies that have all the budget in the world. And we're so happy that they exist because we want to be vendors for them and take some of their money too. Ha 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 ha. So that's me. Really quickly, when I talk about diversity, I'm really talking about all the dimensions of diversity. Sometimes people see me and go, oh, a Black woman's talking about diversity. We're talking about ethnic groups. No, we're really talking about all the dimensions of diversity. Diversity really exists in so many different ways. To truly have diverse voices within your team and within your customer base, you're looking to invite all of the people to the table. So when I talk about diversity, we're talking about all of these different types of diversity. Sound good? Questions, let me know. Nope, I keep hitting the wrong thing. Why does diversity matter? Why is it coming up so much? Well, it matters internally, which I'm really talking about internally today. Yes, we want you to invite diverse people to your companies and to your patronage, but today we're really talking about how to impact diversity internally at your businesses. Why does it matter? Because your company culture totally matters. It matters to employee retention. It matters to your happiness as employees. It increases productivity. And ultimately, working with happy people increases your sales. Your company culture totally matters. That's it. real hard, y'all. Any questions there or thoughts or anything big? So the basics of a diversity program is you want to gather the data. You really want to understand what is happening within your business. That means that you really have to be able to have some communication with your employees. Oftentimes, diversity feels like it's going to be a really big, hard thing to start or to take on, especially for people who don't feel like they're traditionally a part of a diverse group. It can feel like something that maybe we don't have the space or the credibility to talk about internally. Well, I think there's a lot of credibility in saying that diversity matters to you. And that is in itself gives you the credibility to start making it something to talk about. But it's one of those hard things to talk about because it's politically charged. There are a lot of feelings involved. But I think if we can start by saying we want diversity as a part of our company culture, and it's something that we want and is important to us, we can start to have the conversations around it, and we can just start using the words around it. One of the reasons why sometimes it can be hard is oftentimes when I describe myself in workshops like this and I say, I'm a Black woman, I'll see somebody wince and I'm like, it's okay, it's just true. It's simply the description of me. And it's because there are a lot of people who are unsure of what words it's okay for them to say. So I think if we can just start by having communication where we can talk about even those feelings, I'm not sure what I should be saying in this instance. Prefacing something with that gives you at least the credibility that you do care and that you're interested in the conversation. So we have to start having the conversation so that we can gather the data. Once you get that data, you have to generate some buy-in. You have to get everybody on board with why this matters. Typically, the way that I do that is I start talking about what else matters to our companies. If you look at diversity statements for companies, oftentimes they have the same sort of verbiage as sustainability statements. That one's not that controversial. We care about creating sustainable practices which allow our companies to move on forever in perpetuity. Well, of course we do. That's the same as saying we care about having an inclusive workforce where everyone feels included in our company and their voices are heard. That's really a large part of what diversity is it's including that verbiage in your company culture. Just as you care how you treat people externally, you really care about how you treat people internally. So when we use that language alongside the same language that we talk about the other ways that we treat our employees, it's easier to generate that buy-in because it really starts to click that this is a part of how we treat people. The other thing I always say is just start small. It can be simply listening, and it can be creating feedback loops. Once you start to do that, and you've done that for a while, meaning we gather the information, we listen to it, and then we actually are accountable for it. Once we do that, then we can start doing more and more and more. But we have to know where to start and where we are before we can start. So these are the basics of what a program looks like. So with that, of course, there are challenges. Typically, the easiest challenge on things like this, and the one that I hear the most, is limited budget and inexperienced staff. Now, with inexperienced staff, I always like to add the caveat of this also shouldn't be the work of the people who are diverse and contain some diversity within their descriptions. You don't want to find the me on your staff and say, hello, you are brown and we'd like to give you this job. We want to empower the people who are interested in diversity to be a part of it. So it really should be an opt-in versus an endowment for the people of color or the diverse people in your staff. But with budget and inexperienced staff, there are so many resources, even this resource, for pretty inexpensive ways to learn more. There are millions of books, and I'm happy to share more resources. But it's pretty easy to get around that part of it. The other things that come up is knowing what to measure and what are the relevant benchmarks. It's a space where a lot of these things aren't quantifiable. It really is qualitative information. So a lot of it is sentiment. First, you got to know how your employees feel about your culture. And sometimes we don't want to know how they feel about their culture, because if you don't want to know, that's probably a good inkling that it might not be the best, or that there's opportunity to really improve. There's always the challenge of how are we going to share this, and how are we going to get people to know about it? Typically, I ask, what are the channels that we talk about all of the other things that we need to talk about? If there's a new holiday that you've added to the calendar, we want to push this information out the same way that we would push that information out. And then really, it's just knowing how to sell the business case for this internally across the company. And that comes back to our communication. So how do we tackle the challenges? And then we'll also talk about some of the ways that other companies are tackling those challenges. Has anybody had any of these challenges or any of these specific challenges for anyone on the call? Everybody's like, I'm listening, but I wasn't right here, right now, Tauri. If this is a challenge that you deal with, feel free to ask the questions, because I'm absolutely happy to help. So there's a couple of ways that we can deal with those and create solutions for those. If budget's an issue, the easiest, cheapest thing you can do is to listen and make space and time. The thing that I always say with listening is listen without prejudice. With that, my suggestion is that understand that it's really easy to take feedback on a company internally, meaning it's really easy to internalize that. Try to listen without prejudice and recognize that there are a lot of things that go into the experiences that people are having internally. But the cheapest thing you can do is simply to listen. There's something really important about feeling heard and being seen within spaces. And we can simply do that, and that costs us nothing. With something like inexperienced staff, open up the communication. There might be someone who knows a little more, but we also oftentimes can learn so much from each other. I've seen a lot of companies that simply do a diversity reading club. Like every month or so, everybody gets together, or a group of people get together. They're reading the same books, and they have conversations about how that information hits them in different ways. And then when it's affordable, training the staff, seeking out people who can come in, can give you more information, and there's lots of organizations that are happy to do that. And then the way that you can measure the internal and external sentiment, the good news is that too can be pretty inexpensive with surveys, and giving people the opportunity to survey in anonymous ways to collect that information and really start to understand if there are patterns. We've got, it's the Blue Zone team, or Blue Zone. Yes, we've got a question.
Yeah, I have a question about, I think the advice to just listen as a starting point is really great. And I'm wondering if you have any resources that you can share. If somebody is somebody wants to start listening, but is new to this, how they might be able to listen actively and not sort of take what they hear personally. Yeah. I think sometimes when we listen, we want to make the person feel heard, but we also can feel like they might be directing their feelings towards us specifically, and then we get defensive. And so just in the interest of helping people prevent that from happening, do you have any resources that you could share?
I'll find specific active listening resources for you. One thing I always suggest is to listen in pairs versus one-on-one.
Because different people hear it differently.
And so that then there can be the internal conversation of what internally was heard. And then taking the time to decenter yourself before that instance and meeting. So this conversation isn't about me specifically, unless it is. If it's about you specifically, you probably shouldn't be taking the feedback. P.S.
No, that's great advice too. Okay, thank you.
Somebody else should be taking the feedback. So if, for instance, I'll use a me as example. If your CMO is the problem, your CMO should not be taking the feedback. It should be someone else on the team that should be taking the feedback, but then also decenter the intent, because intent is oftentimes the way that we scrub out what is happening. So it's not the intent behind the way something was given, it's how it was received. So if you can center how things are received versus how they are given, then we can start to understand the impact in which that they're actually having. Does that make sense? So that's one way to actively listen. The other thing I say is, like, those conversations should be happening in rooms without anything. And that time should be dedicated to listening. Meaning, I don't have those conversations. Again, I told you guys I'm a small business owner. I don't think we have, I'm sure we have nobody who is in competition with my tiny little theater in Austin, Texas. We have those conversations one-on-one in spaces where nothing else is happening. Meaning I have to sit and make eye contact and I take notes. But those are the only things that happen in those spaces, because the goal is really for me to just be listening. Because so often, if you take a meeting at your desk, it's very likely that you pick up your phone and look at it, that an email comes in and you look at it. Those are sort of just natural human things. But when you are actively listening, taking out those physical opportunities to listen to anything else, and then if there are two people listening, you can then really go back and debrief on what you both heard. And really then your goal is to decenter each other in that conversation. So you have an accountability partner in decentralizing yourself in that conversation. Yes. Hi, Mary.
Hey, hi. You keep using the word center, decenter.
Yes.
I actually don't know what that means.
Perfect. I'm so happy you asked. Here's a great example. It's right off the top of my head. I hope you like it. And I have kids. I have a 7-year-old. So if my 7-year-old goes, "Mom, you didn't feed me dinner," it's very easy for me to center myself in the conversation and say, "I was really busy. I'm just getting off of a workshop." Maybe it was lunch she was asking for. "I'm just getting off of a workshop. I wish you had just grabbed a snack." Well, that centers me in the conversation, but actually what my 7-year-old is saying is she's hungry and she needs help. If I center her in the conversation, I take care of her in the conversation, as opposed to thinking about how this conversation affects me. So the person who is doing the thing that is causing the injury is not centered. It's the person who is receiving the action, which is in this example, me not feeding my child. I swear, y'all, my kids eat 3 squares a day, I swear. Centering my child in the conversation centers what she's receiving, which is she's needing something, and her needs being centered means I care for her and then deal with myself second. Does that help?
It does. And so if you were to do the replay of putting your daughter at the center, how would you respond?
"Sweetheart, I understand it's time for you to have lunch. What can I help you get?"
Okay.
So
Thank you.
in the instance of a diversity conversation, it could be, again, using the real life experience from my theater. It is, we have, if you follow comedy, a lot of comics are guys. The lineup for a show was lots of guys and there were no women in the show. And as opposed to me responding with no women submitted for that show, so I can't put girls on stage and ladies on stage if they don't submit for the show, the response then is, how can I find more women and not put up shows until I have a a more diverse lineup. So then it's my job to go make policies that means a show doesn't go up until I have a more diverse lineup. It doesn't hit the stage. And that's where I also say, like, it's easy to be like, ugh, to have that response and go, but there's all these things that make it really hard. And those are the challenges of it, is that oftentimes it takes a bit more work because we are seeking people who may not naturally be in those roles. And that naturally is the interesting word there, because it's the circumstances around which they haven't been there aren't in fact natural and have been constructed over such a long period of time that now we have to do the extra work to create the space for more people to be in the position to take advantage of these opportunities. Does that help? Yeah. Ooh, I always like the mental gymnastics around finding the way to describe a thing without saying anything political. It's awesome. Let's see. I see a couple in the chat. Okay, good. And thank you for your questions. I love those. So another thing that we get is like, what is this? How do we do this feedback loop? How do we understand how people are feeling? For a long time, there were corporate cultures were oftentimes very closed off to what people's feelings were in spaces. There was oftentimes a culture where it was sort of like, you come to do your job, we pay you for your work, you leave. Your feelings are your own. Well, that has changed significantly. There's been a huge shift. And now it really matters whether people can feel like their whole selves at work. And it matters because it's expensive to hire new people. Brass tacks, if we boil it down to money, it stinks to have to hire new people and to start things over. What we can start to do is really understand what's happening in the workplace and be more inclusive. And that happens with having open communication where we can start to talk about the systems at which consistently people are having the same feelings. And we don't understand that until we really have more culture check-ins, until there are, when I say a feedback loop, that means having surveys regularly or ways that people can anonymously report things that are happening that give them a negative feeling, that they say there's somebody that needs to know this is happening. Who do I go to? And the reason why it's an anonymous loop is because if in fact it is the person who you might be telling that is the problem, we want to make a way for people to create other systems of getting information in that allow that information to come in. So one of the things that I always suggest is that you can report something to anyone in management, not just a specific person or not just an HR person. Oftentimes we have a relationship with someone that is different than maybe say HR, then allow anyone in management to receive that information and then pass it along to HR. They're not the person that's going to deal with it necessarily. If you don't have HR, I highly suggest finding maybe a contractor or someone who you can start to create those systems with. Or is there a person on your team that can take on this part of company culture? It's oftentimes, when I say company culture, this is also like, who's planning the holiday meals? That's a part of your company culture. Who is making sure we reward people on their work anniversaries? That's a part of your company culture. So there's ways we're already in tune to people's feelings in our company culture. Diversity is a part of that. And now it's being conscious about talking about diversity, because that's great. There once was that culture of ignoring or not seeing or not appreciating people's differences. Now we're in a space where we really want to celebrate those differences. So opening up those opportunities to really have open communication about culture. And then sharing those initiatives and resources, do it in your tried and true methods, and then maybe creating some new ways. We'll talk about some really cool ways some of the businesses there have created the opportunities for that. And then how do you sell this internally for DEI? It's really recognizing that, especially in the last couple of years, there have been changes in the workforce that make retention more necessary than ever. Definitely. Oh, I changed slides. There we go. And so we hear it on the news. It's true in our businesses all the time, but also looking at the ways that like increasing diversity can solve the challenges within your business. If hiring's a problem, what are the different ways that we can hire? Who are the different groups of people that we can hire? Who have we been overlooking in the past? And do we have a preconceived idea of who the employees are? And are we overlooking opportunities for other people because of that? Questions? You guys keep raising those hands if you want, but you can also just come off of mute and yell at me. I always like a good solid yell. Thanks for coming, Marissa. Awesome. So, diversity in action. There are some really innovative and amazing ways that some of the businesses in your area are taking advantage of diversity and really paying attention to the things that they can do. So we have Cake Bread. Cake Bread has really been very clear about what their goals are. And I like this because it's really easy to understand how to implement diversity and equity and inclusion if you have very clear goals. Their goals are to be create an exceptionally inclusive work environment and culture. Beautifully put. That all of the ways that we can invite people and let's see, we've got some. Did someone have a question? Sorry, I can't see everybody at once. And then to create a leadership role in the wine industry and our community by promoting diversity and racial equity. I love that. Equity is really recognizing that equity is not about giving everyone the same thing. It's about giving everyone what they need to rise to the same level. And that's a really beautiful way of putting it. And they've really fully integrated DEI into their culture. They've done big, huge trainings with their full management and their full staff, and they're continuing those trainings ongoing. They have community service days that they've added for every employee, including part-timers, which is awesome. And they have floating holidays. They increased their number of floating holidays to include the opportunities for people to take advantage of the holidays that they have that might not be those, the ones that are on the old school American calendar, I'll say. And they've increased their communication by adding coffee meetups. I love this idea. It's something that I see a lot of businesses do, where they simply create opportunities and spaces for people from different parts of business and people who are different to really make and create relationships across different parts of the business. It's a wonderful idea. Again, this is a super cost-effective way to increase the communication and the opportunities for people to create relationships throughout your business. They've also instituted a new recruiting program and updated that to include DEI recruiting resources. They actually put 50% of their recruiting through resources that have diverse candidates. So they're looking for candidates in the spaces where those candidates are. And then they've started a scholarship program as well. Any questions on any of that? Awesome.
Tauri, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Thank you, Tauri. I'm a local wine industry recruiter.
Huh?
And it's very much on the topic of my clients' inclusion and diversity. I find it sometimes difficult to have the conversation when they don't really know the terms. And what I'm taking away from this meeting, this discussion you're having, the DEI resources, it sounds to me like focus more on culture, on opportunities, leveling the playing field, generally speaking, rather than diving deep into any one particular ethnicity or gender. Am I hearing that correctly?
I think you can be really specific in understanding what a specific company's issue, like deficiencies are in their group. So I personally think that you want lots of different voices because diversity, because no one group is a monolith. Meaning that having a person of color on your team doesn't mean that that person is now the diversity for any of those other dimensions. So recognizing that somebody who is queer and a part of LGBTQ communities doesn't speak for people who are BIPOC or people of color, just as some specific BIPOC groups definitely don't speak for the people of other BIPOC groups, meaning that me as a Black woman, I definitely don't speak for the ideals or existence or experience of people who are Asian or Latinx or immigrants, because I myself am not those things. So recognizing that diversity exists within all of those spaces, and that just as in those cases, I definitely can't speak to, I can be an ally and an advocate for people of different ages and people who are differently abled, but I don't speak for those voices either.
Interesting. The majority of candidates that I speak with, particularly women candidates, ask the question, what is your policy on diversity and inclusion? And sometimes it's difficult to quantify, but one of the recurring themes is they're not really interested in, whether you hire women or people. They were interested in, is there opportunity for growth in all categories of diversity? And that's a very interesting topic. As I'd love to get more resources online, perhaps of the recruiting resources you mentioned in the last slide.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And one of the things I'll tell you is that of the companies that I have done consulting with, it's so often that people come into a workshop. I teach these, I teach a 8-hour workshop on diversity where people assume they're going to come in and learn about diversity based on race and ethnicities. And they oftentimes are going, hey, we don't have a big problem with this, because they're thinking race and ethnicity. And very, very often there are issues internally with misogyny or women who aren't rising to a specific level, or there are issues with immigrants internally. And that oftentimes those are the ways, because oftentimes those are the overlooked ways that bias shows up in groups, because it hasn't been chic to be racist in a really long time, y'all. I don't know if you know. Also, I'm not saying it was ever chic to be racist. There's my qualifier. But I think that people have been conditioned to not say those sorts of things out loud, but there are ways that misogyny shows up in the way that people are treated, meaning oftentimes women are feeling forced to talk about what their plans are for children and how that affects their opportunity to move up within companies. And if that means that they have the bandwidth or the time to take on other roles and those sorts of opportunities. That's one of those ways that it shows up in the tiniest little way that can affect a large swath of employees. And people don't even connect that with being a part of possible issues of bias and misogyny in their thought process. And that's one of those sneaky ways that people have to work on to kind of overcome. So that's Ooh.
Thank you very much.
We have Cliff Family Winery has done a really wonderful job of really taking on diversity in a large way. They created a DEI task force. They created a forum for their employees to really have a comfortable space to share ideas and make suggestions that affect all aspects of culture and employee life. And that's really awesome, because what it does is it starts to help your employees see that their lives and whole person really do matter. It creates a really beautiful connection and bond. This is something that I love, 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 is they, with that, they create group icebreakers for all of their meetings. And those icebreakers have really deepened their knowledge of each other personally and professionally. It's a really great way to create that communication and the verbiage around diversity by having a way to talk about it in large groups and in groups and doing it often. Because it is, again, one of those spaces where people can feel uncomfortable talking about it, and oftentimes may feel like they don't have the credibility to talk about it. Making space and creating the opportunity to exercise those muscles, those communication muscles, is a really great way to do it. They've partnered with a consultant, a specific DEI consultant, and they are rolling out trainings to everyone on their team. They've also created partnerships for their monthly SIP and support programming. And one of those community partners is the LGBTQ Connection. So really reaching into the community is a beautiful way to do it. And they've built volunteer partnerships with the, I'm going to say it, Suskol Intertribal Council. Yes. And then they've really revised their interviewing process to be more inclusive and cast a wider net. So I would also say they might be worth reaching out to see what they're doing locally. Christopher. Any questions? So this is really deep, good stuff that you can do, that a lot of this doesn't cost you a lot or anything in a lot of ways. We're all sitting in meetings all the time anyway, right? So these are meetings that are very helpful, very productive, and that further your business in a specific area. I'm talking fast today. So one of the best practices I can tell you is to recognize mental health in the workplace. A big part of your mental health and that of your employees is recognizing the full person in this space. And recognizing that a part of that is seeing all the dimensions of a person. So truly recognizing that they are, yes, we are all more than any of our individual dimensions, but that all of our dimensions really create who we are, including our age, our size, our color, our religion, our preferences. All of those things make up who we are. And if we can connect to those things, make those things seen, celebrate those differences, that we can truly make our internal cultures something that people can enjoy, but also really give people the opportunity to be their best and most at work. And then creating feedback and communication. That's my biggest all day long. It can be as simple as Google Forms, and it can be as sophisticated as hiring a consultant to come in and to do it all for you, but it could be as simple as having coffee with new people each month. And then incorporating diversity into your hiring goals and strategies. This one oftentimes can feel like you are creating quotas. My suggestion is to really look at where the paradigm is if you're in a space where you are not getting those candidates, look at what your candidate pool is and look at the diversity of the pool, and creating diversity within that pool should give you then the best output of who you're actually picking for the jobs. I personally don't love the idea of picking people based just on race or diversity, unless it really fits what your specific goals are. If you have a customer base who doesn't look anything like the internal people who are serving them, then we may want to look at ensuring that we have an internal crew and team who looks more like the people we want to attract, so that we can understand that group more. Questions about that one? There's always recruiting questions. And really looking at what are the pools of people who there's a lot of opportunity. One of those I like to think about is rethink differently abled candidates. There are so many different, there are lots of different organizations who help to place candidates who are differently abled. This includes looking at people who are veterans, looking at also look at women who've been outside of the workforce for some time. Those are oftentimes pools of candidates and people who are maybe closer to retirement or a bit older than your average pool of candidates. Those are huge opportunities where those candidates are oftentimes overlooked, and really phenomenal candidates who add so much diversity in voice and in point of view to your spaces. Oh, I put feedback and communications twice. Forgive me. So other questions? What are the challenges that you see in your diversity programs? Hi, Dave.
Hi. So yeah, when you have a very specialized industry, it's just hard finding anyone that has those skills. And how do you go about, expanding your pool in those situations?
So one thing I typically suggest, and Dave, will you tell me where it is that you are and what it is that you do?
Sure.
I'll give you more specific examples.
No problem. Yeah, so I work for MCE. We provide clean energy throughout counties in the north of California, and so we have certain positions that are very specialized in regards to understanding energy efficiency, solar, things like that. And so we of course have these goals, and just trying to figure out how to make sure that the people that we're serving are reflected in our hiring practices.
Yeah. One thing I typically, on like a company level, one thing I talk about is creating some diversity within your vendor pools so that you have stronger pools for referrals. So that when you are when you're asking for referrals on employees, you have a diverse pool that you're pulling from and that you're asking. So, and that's one easy place to sort of institute things like quotas. So it's saying that if you're pulling a vendor quote on something, you have to pull 3 vendors, and one of those vendors has to have a founder who is from a diverse background or from a traditionally disadvantaged background. So that's going to, by having more diverse vendors and diverse business relationships, when you're looking for new candidates, you can pull in more of those. If you are a larger company and you have a more robust recruiting system, then it really is looking for people who have the right abilities, but not the exact, well, you're looking for exact specialized things. And that can really tighten it. So then it's making sure, if you do have external recruiters or internal recruiters, letting them know that they have to do the legwork of finding people who have those diverse dimensions. So is it that they are going after people and genuinely going after people on something like a LinkedIn and searching out those candidates? but also finding people who may be in that pool and asking them if they know anyone who might be close. So going after the candidate who might not have all of the things and saying, I'm not sure if you're a fit for this position, but we're looking for candidates, especially would love candidates who have diverse backgrounds. And you can be specific about what those are. We're really looking to increase the number of women on our team. We're really looking to increase the diversity in thought on our team, so on and so forth. It also can be sometimes opening up whether we're willing to import people from other parts of the country or parts of the world, and bringing diversity in that way. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. What other challenges do we have? Carol, Robert, I feel like I'm looking at you guys because you guys have your cameras on. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free. Well, if not, I think I might give you guys a few minutes back in your lives.
Thank you, Tauri. Sorry, I had major computer issues there for a second. I'm now on my phone, but we made it work.
And I know if MCE has any questions or any insight they'd love to add, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, Dave, if you want to share kind of some of the stuff you guys have been doing.
Yeah, so I didn't want to get into too many specifics on with the few minutes that we have left, but we really appreciate this opportunity to share, and hoping that next year we can actually be more of a participant in this type of event. So I think for us, it was really having a thorough and complete plan that included a lot of accountability, so that you wouldn't just go through the exercise, kind of check the box and say, yeah, well, we tried, and then move on. So having regular check-ins with our staff at the leadership level to ensure that, the various managers in different departments are actually fulfilling their goals, and if not, trying to figure out, hey, why not? Why are we not reaching our goals? And being able to adapt as well, and realizing that not everything's going to work, even though you think, oh, this is a great idea, may not end up working out. So having that built-in accountability, I think, was really important. And so and having each department report in was also critical, because there's work to be done in each department to ensure that there can be goals in each department, and there's work to be done in all different facets of our work life. So I think that some of those are some of the key takeaways that I took from the work we've done. I'm also a bit newer, so I'm also learning about our work. And this webinar was an opportunity for me to learn about what other companies have done, so I can hopefully integrate it into some of our work.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the thing that I always impress is that it's an ongoing work, that diversity is, it's not a checkbox that gets done. I would say it might be a quarterly checkbox that we've touched on it, we've pushed out the information, and we've thought about it and done the work, but it definitely isn't something that you do once and that you leave. It's an ongoing work. Leanne?
Oh, I'm also with MCE, and I was so glad to listen to your presentation. So thank you for that. Just wanted to add that about 3.5 years ago now, MCE did start with some DEI training for staff, and I was surprised that it was the first time a lot of these staff had ever had any type of training like that. I had come from an industry that did a lot of training, and so I came with all these assumptions of what other team members already knew, but my assumptions were wrong. So I was really glad to be part of that. Out of those trainings, we did create a DEI Tiger team made up of individuals from all departments, And I think we're still, and the Tiger team has created some goals. And as Dave was talking about, we do report out annually around how we've reached some of those goals, and then we identify new ones. But I think we are now looking at, okay, what do we really want this Tiger team to be and to do, and how do we continue to bring what we're learning from our communities into the agency, and then make sure that the way that we're communicating with our agencies, with our communities, is inclusive at all times. And I've wrote down some learnings from today and ideas that we can then continue to build on, because as you said, it's a continuous process.
Well, and it's consistently changing. So the example I always give is that, if you were born in the late 70s like me, a hashtag wasn't a hashtag until recently. It was the pound sign on the telephone, and the telephone had a cord to it, y'all. It's real crazy, but our language is changing just as the world is evolving. And at the 5 years ago, we weren't talking about pronouns very often. And now we understand so much more about how to ask someone what pronouns are theirs. 5 years ago, I was teaching what pronouns do you prefer. Now I teach what pronouns do I use for you. So the language changes as we understand more. There's always a space to be an ally for someone, and that is both as an individual and as a group and an organization. So I think it's definitely a consistently changing space. Thank you. I gotta thank you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tauri. We love having you so much, and hopefully soon we'll be able to have you back in person. And for everyone that's on this call, our next our webinar has actually turned into an in-person seminar. We're very excited for our first in-person seminar in a very long time, and that'll be our membership university on Tuesday, July 26th at Hotel Yountville from 8:30 to 10. And that is a great way to learn about all the different benefits we offer. And Tauri and I will work on a time for her to come out and do some improv diversity training with us as a group, because I've wanted to do that for a while. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. I will send out the recording here tomorrow. And then Tauri, if you want to send me any additional links, I can add that into the email as well. That will go out to everyone that was registered.
Great. Sure will. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sticking with my issues with technology.
Happens to the best of us. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Stay cool, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay.